All right, we're rolling. Chance, welcome to the
All right.
podcast. Thank you. I know you were busy this last weekend and you weren't able to make it, but the fact that you were able to like reschedule, I do really appreciate it. I just want you to know
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel bad about not making it last week, but
It's good. I actually had another person reschedule the same weekend. And I normally do two for each weekend because I do two podcasts a week, and I stay ahead of it.
oh,
And
okay,
so I ended up
sure.
having to reschedule both of you guys, but I also got the free weekend,
Oh,
so it's not too bad. It
that's
worked
good.
out.
Yeah.
Am I coming in clear? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, sweet. All right.
Yeah.
Well, when I went through, uh, I don't have a direct or an indirect connection with you, but I saw you were the cinematographer for a film, Bystanders, that recently came out, and
Mhm.
I've had interactions with the one of the main actresses,
Mhm.
Brandy, in the past, and
Yeah.
so I saw her, she posted it, and then I'm like, oh, and then I kind of went down the rabbit hole of who
Mhm.
all was involved with this because I'm also in the Dayton, Cincinnati area, which you seem to be also. You're in the area too, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Yes, I am. So,
okay, but yeah, I love cinematographers. I like to see inside their equipment
yeah.
because you guys are like a combination of like nerds and also have to like you're like nerds as well as like electrical nerd. I can't talk. It's been a long day. This is gonna be.
No, it's all good.
You guys are like electrical nerds, but also quasi directors at the same time. So you're kind of
Yeah.
piecemealing two different worlds, whereas the director is more just focused on, you know, steering the ship, essentially.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's an interesting combination. I've always said it's an interesting combination of science and art.
it
'Cause you've
is.
got the technical side of the camera, and everything that goes into that, with digital imaging, whether it's film or digital,
Hmm.
there's a lot behind both of it technically, but then you also have to put it together in an artistic fashion. So, you know.
Hmm. Well, I went through your IMDb, and you've been in a lot of different areas. You've done like best boy gaffers, camera
Mhm.
operators, and so you're not just a cinematographer, but you have been in most of the other positions that are in the camera department. And so, would you say that's pretty
Yeah.
accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. Some people consider the on-set dresser to be not in the camera department, but they work very closely with the DP. I personally have not done set dressing, but yeah, I've spent most of my career in the electrical department. I've done grip work as well. Yeah, and lately I've been doing more DP and camera operating. So.
Okay, is that so? The DP and camera operating, is that more of a newer part of your career, or have you been intermittently
Yeah,
changing throughout it?
kind of intermittently changing, but my focus lately has been more towards cinematography. So,
Okay, all right. Um, and so, how long ago did you start? And tell me how you got started, just to kick this off.
I was in school, didn't like what I was doing. Kind of had a little bit of a existential crisis.
As it
Just
goes.
didn't know where I was going. I was in the science field, didn't like it, and was going through a course catalog and saw motion picture production. And ever since I was a kid, I always thought behind the scenes of movies was fun. It seemed like fun, Like I remember watching like Star Wars behind the scenes and trying to recreate, some of that stuff as a kid. Um, so it's like I have a backup, so I'm gonna go try this, and I did, and haven't looked back.
What was the
So,
degree that you had that wasn't film related?
no, it's physics.
Oh, physics. You should have been a visual
Yeah,
effects
yeah.
artist, man. You would have had a ball, because those guys are physicists. Like they have to calculate the forces on
Oh,
particular
sure.
particles and velocity and all those things. So it's interesting that you went down that rabbit hole instead.
Hmm.
Um, so when was your first? How did you carve out getting into cinematography? Because you have touched a number of areas with the electrical department.
Yeah, I guess when I first went to film school, I think like everybody who goes to film school, I was like, oh, I'll be a director, and
Hmm.
very quickly learned I actually didn't want to be a director, but I just fell in love with cinematography. It was just very quickly, I just gravitated towards that. And, I knew lighting is such an important part of it. So I was like, that's where I'm going to start.
Okay. Did you have? Is there a? what influenced you to go into cinematography? You just wanted, it was just the nerd in you that wanted to see like what actually went into the camera work and everything. Because normally, like people when they go to
Yeah.
college, like you said, for film school, it's like usually it's like director or writer or one of those things.
Mhm.
So, what attracted you specifically towards cinematography?
It's hard to say. I grew up, no dispersion on my parents or anything, but it was just I grew up in a Midwest family where it was, the arts weren't necessarily a money making endeavor, right? It was more, you
Right.
need to be science based, or engineering based or whatnot, and so when I first went to school, that's how I approached everything. It was from that perspective, and then I got into. Then when I decided to go into motion picture, I was like, oh, the cinematography still has like a science side to it. So I think
Right.
that's probably why I gravitated towards it. But I don't know. Just as I was in film school, I latched on to trying to make gorgeous images. You
Okay.
know, it's hard to say exactly why I latched onto that, but I did. And yeah, I haven't looked back since.
Well, you've been on a number of larger productions as well as more indie work, and so you've kind of seemingly looking at your IMDb, you've kind of been in both worlds essentially, because you were on the one that sticks out of my mind, which is at the top of your IMDb page is the Winter Soldier, which part of it was filmed in Cleveland, and so you were a part of the camera unit for that shooting that happened in there,
Rigging electric.
rigging and electric. Okay, and
Yeah,
so
rigging electric. So
yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. IMDb usually puts the electrical department in with its camera and electrical department. So,
Okay, gotcha.
but yeah, I was a reading electric. So,
Well, with because indie filmmaking and then big budget filmmaking, they're two different worlds.
Mhm.
Because you've been in both, are there any like things that you notice in terms of the logistics of a camera and electrical that one could benefit from the other?
Mm. Sometimes they're kind of the same beast, just different scales, right?
Okay.
So, I think a lot of the way that a large movie approaches things, you can take that into the indie world and approach a smaller movie from that same kind of perspective, just knowing you don't have the budget to throw at problems.
Right.
The money's just not available. But I think that the pre planning has a lot to do with it as well. So knowing what you're getting into, I think, is very important, especially in the indie world. So
Okay. Um,
yeah.
And the well, when in the indie world, you are working with like a smaller budget, and so
Mhm.
specifically when it comes to your work as a DP and a cinematographer, um, and you don't have a large budget, and you have to pick what you want very specifically and very meaningfully.
Mhm.
So when it comes to lighting and gear, in order after you've talked with the director to accomplish his
Mhm.
vision, what tends to be for you the biggest priorities when you're working on a smaller budget?
Uh, Usually starts with my shot list. My shot list or storyboards,
Hmm.
overheads. It kind of depends on what I'm doing. I like Previs Pro a lot, which allows me to do nice detailed overheads while seeing storyboards. So that's how I start to approach everything. Is what am I looking at? What am I wanting to shoot? So as far as technicality goes, like going into like lighting. So from there, then it's like, well, what do I want to achieve? What is the look I want to achieve? And
Right.
then you have to look at what do you have budget wise in your arsenal, right? So not every movie is going to have cranes and condors and moving 18Ks and everything like that. So it's like you might for a large night scene, you might still want an overhead softbox, but you don't have the budget for it. So what do you do to be able to replicate that on a smaller budget and a smaller scale? And sometimes it is just about bringing the scope down and focusing on a smaller area. That can help.
Is there a common motif when it comes to working with indie filmmakers that you think the directors of indie films tend to overskip more or neglect more that you think that generally you find that you have to point out that they need to pay attention to?
Mm, Hmm. An interesting question. Um,
I'll throw you a softball next time. I'll just ask you what your
yeah.
favorite color is.
Oh yeah. No, no. No, it's sometimes scale can be an issue, especially for first
Scale.
time
Okay.
for first time directors. Scale can kind of be an issue. Like we all see Avengers, or Winter Soldier,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
everyone wants their movie to be like, to be that grand, and I think that's great, but sometimes you're not something that's great, but not everyone has a $250 million budget. Right. So I think sometimes just bringing your scope down, like huge crowd scenes, let's not do a huge crowd scene. Let's bring it down.
So you think they have
I
like
think
an
that's,
unrealistic expectation of what they can actually get out of their budget?
I don't want to say that. I think we all come in looking at a film as what is the best that we can do.
Sure.
Right. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So, I think, I don't want to say all directors come in, with a grand, with a scale big can. We should all try to achieve getting the most out of our budget, right? But sometimes I have read scripts where the scale is like, okay, this is a little big for what we're trying to, for what we're able to achieve here, and so just kind of how do we bring it down a little bit sometimes, I think that's kind of maybe one of the things going from a large budget movie to a very small indie movie.
When you're talking with the director and you're trying to accomplish, what is on the script, how often do you think you and the director and, the heads of department have to veer off from the script just to be able to accomplish it when the script is a bit demanding?
Hmm. Um, in my experience so far, I want to say on the films that I've shot, we've pretty much been able to achieve what was written in the script. Um,
Well, that's good.
yeah, yeah. You know, um, yeah. Sorry. I'm thinking here. Um, yeah, just for the most part, yeah. I feel like we have been able to achieve what was on the script, but um, yeah.
Okay. When you're looking from your experience, because I did see bystanders, but that's the only thing of yours that I have seen. So if
Okay.
you have, more, uh, if you have other examples that are coming to mind, that's kind of the only reference I'm going off with. And so I'm just,
Okay.
prefacing it with that.
Sure. Sure.
Um,
Sure.
how many features have you DP for? Curiously.
So I'm looking at two standards. Say 3 or 4 as of right now. So
Okay.
yeah.
What was the biggest budget of that you had to work on with of the
Uh,
4 that you've done?
was probably Mutilator too.
Mutilator 2. Okay, that I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to look that up later because that sounds like a good indie title, Mutilator 2. Because I talked to
Yeah. Have you?
another, I had an actress on, um, that's also local, and she was doing the second local indie movie called Attack of the Corn Zombies or something like that, and
Oh, I
that's
think I've heard of
yeah,
that.
yeah, and then another one by I think he was in it by another guest I had. His name's Patrick Johnston. He's in like House of Pancakes or something like that, or Horror House of
Hmm.
Pancakes. It's like there's something about
Yeah.
indie titles of just like being able to be like, hey, that kind of sound like an amusement park in some ways.
Yeah. This is what we are.
Yeah, Mutilator 2. Like it's very specific.
Yeah.
You say Mutilator 2, the second one? So
Yeah.
there's 2 of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah. So the first one was 40-ish years ago. Bud Cooper, a wonderful
Oh,
guy.
okay. I see.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen The Mutilator. It's
I,
a
I've, I've
somewhat
I've seen the title, but I haven't watched
okay.
it.
Yeah, it's kind of a cult movie. It famously had I think an NC-17 rating when it first came out, and had to get
Mm.
cut down to to an R rating to get distributed. So,
I'll have to check this out
and
then.
yeah, yeah, it's a really fun movie. So if
All
you
right.
like slashers,
Yeah.
so but yeah, he wanted to shoot the second one. So they'd been sitting on the script for a little while, and then decided to do it. So and now it's getting distributed by I think a Cardinal XD.
How long ago was
So
this when you shot that?
this we shot this in 2022, I think.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's been a couple years ago.
that's a slasher fic, right? It's just like the original.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
When so you had to shoot a lot of blood and gore and things like that. How do you?
Hmm.
Because that it's not just an art department thing. You know, when it comes to shooting horror, in your experience, how do you how do you best make it look when it comes to lighting? Because you know it's not just the makeup department. You also have to highlight specific aspects of it in order to show the mood of what's going on screen. You know,
Hmm.
with the director's vision. And so when it comes to
Hmm.
lighting, um, a horror that can be very difficult to do because generally horrors take place at night. You know, and there's not a lot of like
Hmm.
horrors taking place at lunchtime. In a park, but
Right.
uh, shooting at night is very difficult. What are the
Mhm.
things that you've found that you've figured out about how to do it correctly?
Yeah. So in the Mutilator 2 example, we had um, a chunk of the movie takes place on a pier, right, at
Okay.
night. So, we didn't have the budget for barges or anything like that to, put lighting platforms out, on the ocean. Obviously, most movies don't have that kind of budget, but, so it's sitting there looking at what we have environmentally to work with. So we had lights on the pier, but at some point they go out, right? In the script, they go out. So
Mm,
the question is okay, now that we have you know, no lights on the pier. How do we see anything? And so,
right.
one of the things that helped is trying to look back towards the town a little bit because then you get some lights in the background and everything like that, so we can motivate our lighting from there. But when we did turn around, we had to kind of fake some lights at the end of the pier shooting back towards us, because while
Oh,
it might
okay.
not be super realistic, we had to be able to see something.
Right,
So
right, right.
yeah.
When you're how because blocking is very important when it comes to shot
Mhm.
composition. What's it like to work with the director in terms of feedback of what looks good in frame for you and what he's wanting? Because there is a push and pull when it comes to that dynamic.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah. And it's a collaboration. I think, you know, you know, I, the blocking, good blocking, I think makes the cinematography easy to do.
Hmm.
So, because if the characters are placed correctly, it's like, well, obviously your camera's going to go here, your camera's going to go here, and then you'll do a turnaround, right? So, good blocking I think makes my job easier. So, it's a collaboration, working with the director. If they want the actors to go do something, I'm like, well, what if they walked over here instead, or
Right.
whatever. And, so, it's a collaboration and compromise.
Do you find that like time constraints when it comes to staying on schedule with production kind of hinder
Mm.
the process between you and the director more often than not?
It can on low budget indies, it can, just because, you don't have a lot of prep time usually, on a big budget movie, the director, DP, production designer, you might have 6 months of prep, on a really large budget movie. On an indie movie, you might have a week or a few days sometimes, so you kind of hit the ground with your feet, hit the ground running basically.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and so it's important to establish a good relationship, early on, talking to the director, knowing what their references are, and, like Mary Beth McAndrews with Bystanders, knowing, what she was wanting to achieve, like for her, there was in Bystanders, there was a large power dynamic, right,
Hmm.
between the three main characters and the frat boys, right? So changing that power dynamic visually over the course of the film is very important to her. And so, I just have to keep in mind where I'm at, filming wise, and where we're at in the script, and how that power dynamic, would play out. So.
Okay. Well, let's see. I, when I watched that movie, I wrote down a question that was very very
Mhm.
specific. When your vision for a shot or a setup is different from the director's, how do you strike a balance between your vision and theirs?
At the end of the day, it's the director's movie,
Mm. Have you had to
right?
insist before, like for the sake of the director? It's like, oh, I think this would accomplish what you want better. Because
Yeah.
sometimes there are disagreements. I'm just curious about
Oh
like
yeah, of
if yeah.
course. yeah, you have multiple artists all coming together to work on a movie, so
It's
of
inevitable.
course there's going to be, it's inevitable, it's just part of the filmmaking process.
Hmm.
Um, if I truly believe in my shot, as opposed to what the director wants, sometimes it's a combination of, or sometimes it might be me showing them what I want, showing the
Okay.
director, hey, this is the shot, do you like this or not, and sometimes I go, this is not, this doesn't fit with how the tone of the film or how I want the scene to go, and sometimes I have to back down. Sometimes maybe you got time, you can shoot both ways, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
kind of compromise and, do multiple angles. So,
Okay. Well, that was also. I mean, I haven't seen Mutilator 2, obviously, but
hmm
bystanders, for all intents and purposes, it is. It's. I saw it was submitted under like a number of horror categories for festivals.
hmm
So
yeah.
is horror your main wheelhouse?
Um, yes and no. I think it's fun to shoot horror movies.
Mm.
You know, uh, I tend to like shooting like, psychological thriller, drama kind of stuff. I like shooting that stuff. But as a cinematographer, you know, shooting horror can have, one look, or not. I shouldn't say one look, but there's usually a tone you're going with. Typically darker. Um, a lot of slashers take place at night, and stuff like that.
Right.
So shooting something like a rom com for me is just it's different because, oh, now I have to light more, and so I enjoy those challenges, so but yes, I have shot a lot of horror movies.
Is that what you prefer? What genre would you prefer to do if you could do it nonstop?
Probably like, drama, psychological thriller, that kind of stuff,
Oh, right, just like
So
you said that.
I've
Is there
been
a
really
movie that
into
sticks out in your mind?
yeah, really been into um 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 sorry, Yorgos Lanthimos right now.
Okay.
Um Poor Things, Kind of Kindness,
I haven't
so
seen it yet, which was a tragedy, but unfortunately, I didn't get to see what how do you pronounce it? Nostafaru? No, is that how you say it?
oh,
If,
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu. Yeah, I always butcher it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Um,
That's okay.
but for all it seems like the reviews for it are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Robert Eggers. I didn't see Lighthouse, but I did see his Northman movie, which had
hmm
some horror elements to it because it takes place in a more primitive time. Um,
Right.
and he's done a great job with those. I just unfortunately haven't seen that one. Have you seen that? Is there anything
Yeah.
that you took away from that movie?
I haven't seen Nosferatu. I did see Northman though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're in the
North.
same boat then.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Northman. Like I said, it did have a lot of horror elements in it. Which I thought was really interesting. So.
Is there
Uh,
a movie or a TV show that you felt has influenced your look the most?
hmm. Hmm. Um. It's kind of, so when I was in film school, I really got into Fight Club.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to say that necessarily, has influenced my look, but I don't know. I kind of look back on that movie a lot because I really do like it. So,
What about it
visually
stuck
and
out in your mind that kind of you took away from?
the visual storytelling with this, the visual storytelling of it. I thought the visuals matched, the tone and
You thought it
themes of the
paralleled very
movie.
well with everything in in the
Yeah.
script. Mm.
Yeah, like, when you're in the office, it's all this, this cold greenish overhead lighting,
Yeah, everything like
but
paralleled really well with what was going on. There was
mhm,
always something that like most of the film like had a double meaning behind it in terms of the way it was
mhm,
set up. When it
yeah.
comes to double meaning, those sorts of things pay off in spades if you do them right. Um,
hmm
and they can, yeah. What do you think
yeah.
from your experience that directors should give more weight and consideration to when it comes to working with the DP or setting up the shot? Is there like a
Hmm.
common
Hmm.
fault that you've had from your experience that's like, no, this needs to be paid attention, have more, attention paid to?
Mm. No, I don't think so. Um, no, I don't think so. Um, yeah, no, sorry, I can't think of one. So yeah.
That's okay. All right, now what's your favorite color?
Oh,
I'll throw you a
that blue on your
softball.
mug, I
The
like a
blue.
lot, actually.
Oh yeah, this well
Yeah,
this I mean it's reading backwards, but it's just a Dunder Mifflin mug from the office.
yeah. No, that blue. I used to have a car that was that color.
Hmm. When you start, well, how long have you been roughly involved in the indie scene? Because you've toggled back and forth between larger production and smaller, and
Mhm.
so one has obviously influenced your work in the other. What in the indie scene do you think, as a community, you
Mhm.
think doesn't get enough attention paid to when it comes to accomplishing their project?
Mm. Um,
Pre-production is usually what I get. I'm just curious on your take.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So you mean, sorry, is your question more along the lines of what kind of gets put on the back burner for indie productions?
Yeah, yeah. But there's also,
Okay,
if
okay.
if you have commentaries on the indie scene, I always like to get people's perspective on that. So after you tell me
Yeah.
about that, go ahead and riff if you want.
Well, I thought your question was more along the lines of, like in the public, like what do indies not
It
really
was,
get
but my
noticed for?
ADHD completely just swapped it on me, and it
Oh, that's
just like
okay.
there's a double meaning, and it just kind of split brain between the two of
Hmm.
them. So yeah, I probably could have
I
phrased
do the
that a
same
little.
thing.
I could probably have phrased that a
Uh,
little bit better, but yeah, go ahead and answer both.
yeah. Well, I think in the indie scene, I think we don't get enough credit for uh, what it takes to put a movie together sometimes. I just think the public doesn't understand because they're used to seeing, giant, big, summer
Mm-hmm.
tentpole movies all the time. But like putting a movie together can be difficult, especially when you're on a smaller budget. You have all these, you know, you know, moving pieces and everything to try and, put together, whether it's actor schedules or whether it's, we don't have enough money to light this night scene the way I want to,
Right.
or
Yeah.
however it goes. The fact that we do pull it off sometimes, I think, is kind of a miracle. So,
So like because there's a lot of indie movies that they're not great. I mean, there's but what people get
because
credit
all
for is
kinds of
like
movies
it's
aren't great.
yeah, yeah. Even large budget pictures aren't sometimes great, and it's actually sometimes more of a shame for a larger budget picture to not do well with audiences
Hmm.
because they had the
Hmm.
resources to accomplish it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but no, I think you're right. It's like just being able to pull something off is a miracle in and of its own.
Yeah.
Even if the product isn't necessarily what people you know gravitate towards compared to
Hmm.
other things, but what
Yeah.
about what do you think gets neglected the most in the indie scene when it comes to production?
I think pre-production. I think that's one of the bigger things.
Okay,
You
is
know.
it more shot listings, setup, or just not accounting for how long something might take? You think?
Yeah. So um, when starting an indie movie, as far as like shot listing and storyboarding and everything like that, um, I don't always get paid for it. So I'll have
This
to
is
do it on my
true.
own.
This is true. Yeah.
But that also limits my ability to talk with the director, talk with the production designer. I'm trying to come up with shots that, since we're not in an office together, not always able to be on the job together,
Right.
it's a little harder to communicate that, at the beginning of the movie. And I think pre-planning can very much help a movie. At least in my opinion, because I'm a little more of I'm not as much of a run and gun kind of guy. I'm a little more of a planner.
You like to set
So
up and kind of set your base up and strategize off of that.
yes, I do. I do. That's how I personally work. But
But
yeah,
sometimes, like in the underworld, like you said, you don't get the luxury of time to be able to make the shot
yeah,
perfect. Yeah.
right. Unfortunately, you don't.
Yeah. Let's see. I got a couple doozies here I wanted to talk to you about, but
Well,
uh,
I just want to say real quick, same thing happens on big budget movies.
What do you think?
You know,
Is it? Do they have bigger failures because it's a bigger budget and they don't plan because more things fall apart?
I don't think it's necessarily bigger failures. I think it's just you sometimes have to rush stuff.
Mm,
It happens. It happens on all sets.
okay.
So just something that happens sometimes.
Well, at least being in the indie world, it is kind of a relief to know that even the big dogs screw up every now and then.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just scale. I mean, for me, my biggest surprise was that large budget movies and small budget movies. A lot of the big difference is just scale. It's just more.
Okay. When you get
Yeah.
approached to do a project, I'm curious, what are like the red flags you look for when it comes to like either a producer or a director approaching you with their ideas and their project to bring you on?
Hmm. Um. I think again. Sometimes, like I said, scale. That can be a big thing. Like if you're if you're an indie movie that's got $150,000 and you're wanting to have a big shootout
Mm-hmm.
with 100 people, you know might not be the most realistic scenario. you know
Okay.
um so that for me, that's kind of things like like maybe bring that down a little bit, or rewrite it a little bit or something, but
When it comes
so
to
um
the camera department, what are the sneakiest costly things that just people just don't anticipate?
that's a good question. um Sneakiest costly things.
Because gear is expensive, it's
It
not
can be.
like it can
It
be,
can
yeah.
be. I think camera movement.
Mm.
Anything dealing with camera movement, I think, adds up very quickly.
Like
Um,
cranes and expensive dollies, and depending on what type of, if you
Jibs,
got,
dollies, yeah, or if you're using smaller camera gimbals, having a gimbal op, that
mm,
sort of thing. Those can. I think those are the types of things that can add up real quick. So if you've got a script where there's tons and tons of camera movement, I think that can eat up a budget real quickly. So.
okay. What would make you say no to a script?
Hmm.
Or when was the last time you said no to a script and why?
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, I think I think I said no to a script. I think the last time I said no to a script was because I could just there was a thing in the back of my head that was just like, this isn't going to happen.
The intuition that it just like they were in over their
Yeah,
heads.
yeah, yeah.
Do you think a lot of indie filmmakers are
Unfortunately,
in over their heads when it comes to approaching, their work? Because it's full, indie world's full of ideas, but not all
it
the
is. It
execution
is.
sometimes can't be afforded.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, not always. No, no. I've had pretty good. I think I've had pretty good luck. You know, um, in
Okay.
in and usually, when I talk about scale, I think usually it's like 90% of the script, 80% of the script is fine. It's
Mm.
just every once in a while, you come up with something that it's like, we might not be able to do that.
Can you
So
give me an
I worked.
example from your personal experience?
Um, let's see here. So I was a gaffer on a movie. It was a spy action thriller movie, right? And we were operating under a smaller budget, um, and lots of jeep chases, gunfire, drones. There was like a
Oh,
swarm of
drones.
drones that was supposed to come in, and I'm gapping it, so I'm talking to the DP, and it's just like, how are we gonna do this? And he's like, like maybe we'll do, it might end up being CGI, and I think that's what ended up happening. For like some of the drone shots and stuff, they ended up being CGI.
Do
So,
you think CGI is not overused like for creatively? Do you think it's overused when it comes to anticipating that CGI can accomplish something that you're just not able to do in production?
mm, I mean, it's another tool. You know, I, you know, I don't hate CGI.
Well, because it's reminiscent of the fix it and post, mentality, which is
It
like,
is,
okay,
it is,
it's
yeah,
not because it's not always like a okay, it's not like it's not like duct tape. You can't just put it on. It's not always going to fix it. It really depends,
Hmm. You're not wrong. You know, it's I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing where when you have pre-planning, you might be able to do it practical, or you might be able to, you know, do, or at least plan around what, a problem that might end up being, oh, I'll fix it in post, we'll just CGI this, But to me, again, that's a pre-planning kind of thing.
Okay. What about
That's,
if?
that's,
Good. No, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say that's a purely non-aesthetic, view on it because I still like puppets and rubber monsters and stuff like that, because it's fun.
Yeah, that's true. Have you had to
Yeah.
shoot for CGI before specifically? Not like we're gonna fix it in post thing, but like specifically for the plot.
Yeah, a little bit. Not nothing too huge. A little bit of green screen here and there, pretty much.
Have you ever had to
So,
work with a visual effects supervisor before?
I have usually as a uh, not on a movie I've been shooting with. So,
Okay.
usually on something I'm gaffing. So actually, I gaffed a visual effects unit for a few
Okay.
days on a movie. So we're literally just shooting squibs and dust hits and stuff like that. So we put up
Hmm.
a black screen or a green screen. We'd have like a hood. And then shoot some zerks
Right.
off of it to get some sparks. Literally that was all we did for like 2 days.
How many people are normally in your unit when you're on a major production? When you're gaffing
Uh,
specifically, because you're getting orders from on high, and
sure.
there's an army that has to deal with these things.
Oh yeah. So when I'm a gaffer, I tend to like to have a crew of one gaffer, one best boy, and then three electricians. And that's usually on a smaller to medium
One
budget
gaffer,
movie.
one best boy, and three
Uh-huh.
electricians. I wouldn't
Yeah.
anticipate that actually that there would be. I mean, electricians. Those are the guys that are just figuring out the logistics of how to run. Or are they just more bodies that are helping with the physical work of it and the labor?
Yeah. The set lighting technicians. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
SLTs. Yeah. That's a more technical term for them. SLTs.
Is that normal? So it's like a 5-man per unit roughly
Yeah.
underneath the
That's
DP.
pretty typical. Yeah, yeah, it's usually pretty typical. But then you've also got, on the grip side, you've got a key grip, best boy grip, and then, three grips and a dolly grip usually, So,
Do you think that there's a point where the group or the unit can be too large and then productivity can get hamstrung?
mm,
Because as someone in like my day job is, for context, is construction. Sometimes there's too
okay.
many cooks in the kitchen, and that's kind of where my question is coming from.
Okay. I have been on a couple projects where, uh, again, as a gaffer knows, DP, where the we were going with the more natural lighting,
Hmm.
and probably not lighting as much, So, um, you know, we were there to provide support for the DP when they needed it, right?
So you're like on
So
call, essentially.
kinda, yeah, it kind of felt like on call, I mean, it's not exactly true, but it was like, we're doing a lot of natural lighting, sometimes just bringing in some bounces or something like that, So, I don't know if that hindered production, but
Okay.
it's yeah, it's a scenario where, um, we, weren't doing much lighting at the time, so you know.
Well, when you're on a bigger production, because I'm curious, I haven't been on a larger production before, so like I'm,
Mhm.
I'm a little more interested in this aspect that
Oh,
you've been
sure,
involved with.
yeah.
I have done a number of things involved with visual effects. I
Mhm.
supervised like a small proof of concept here locally that was like a cyberpunk thing, and there's some some
Mhm.
stuff. It was mostly simple, but I love
Yeah,
dealing with visual effects because like it's like computer magic. It really is.
yeah, sure,
Um,
sure.
uh, on the larger productions, do you uh, obviously the creativity generally tends to be above the line
Mhm.
crew, but when it comes to sometimes something can be so complicated that like maybe the DP might have to go back to his crew, the
Mhm.
gaffers, best boys, and electricians, and see if actually something can even be done in the first place. How often are you just being told what to do and accomplish it no matter what, and how much creative input when you're the gaffer and in the crew of the DP that you actually have some input into?
Yeah, it depends on the relationship with the DP. If the DP trusts me,
Right.
as a gaffer, then a lot of times I get a lot more freedom. You know, um, because once we've established a trust, and they know that I'm trying, I'm trying to achieve their look, and I know what their look is. A lot of times they'll just let me go, and be like, I want a hard back edge from over here, and some sunlight coming in from over here. Go have fun,
Okay.
and I love that. I love that. I think that's a lot of fun. Um, but I've also been on jobs where it's like, put this light here, put that light there.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
when you're working with somebody and it's the first project that you've been on with them, as a
Mhm.
gaffer and you're underneath the DP, how do you win their trust?
Um, that's kind of hard to say. How do you win your trust with anybody?
Normally, I just bribe them personally, but that's just me.
Oh, sure, sure, you can do that. Yeah. No, I think it's just listening, listening to what they're wanting and following through with what they're wanting. You know, um, yeah, I think it's as simple as that. Trying to make, you know,
Like a
uh,
sense of loyalty of being
it,
able to accomplish the demands that they're asking for,
I don't know if it's a sense of loyalty necessarily. I mean,
or not
because
loyalty,
I don't know.
reliability.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah, I
word.
think it's more
Yeah.
of a reliability thing. Yeah,
Hmm.
because if we've talked about a scene and they want it to look a certain way, and then we come in for that day and I start working and that scene looks like what they were wanting.
Okay.
I think that's a good way to win their trust. If I come in, if we've talked about lighting a scene a certain way and then I come in and light it completely differently, it's, A,
Hmm.
I'm failing at my job, and B, I'm not winning their trust. So
Okay. Has there
you know.
been a situation when you were the gaffer and something was just impossible logistically to be able to accomplish? Whether it be
Mhm,
that you didn't have enough time, didn't have the equipment,
mhm.
and they were just being demanding anyway. How have you dealt with people that were harder to work with in this regard?
You give them what you can. I mean, I do my best to achieve, everything that my boss wants.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Sometimes there are things that are out of your control, whether it's a location that has, stricter rules on what we can do lighting wise, like where we can place lights, whether it's outside, or whether it's just you can't physically get a light into a location. I
Mm.
have run into that, it's like, we are on a third story, and I have asked and can't get a condor, so,
Okay.
or a scissor lift or something like that, so, you know, you have to do what you can at that point, so, and it might not be exactly what the DP wanted, but, you try to at least, you try to at least accomplish what they were wanting with,
Do you think they end up
but
being
doing it
more
differently.
like they're understandable if you explain that something can't be accomplished? Is there like
I've
a
had pretty
fairly
good.
amount good of like work relationship and experience? It's just like, hey, this ain't gonna work, and here's why.
Yeah, and I've had pretty good luck in my career so far. That I have
Because there can be
worked
a
with
lot of egos
understanding.
involved, especially in the
Okay,
creative world, and that
sure.
you will run into that eventually.
Oh, sure. Yeah, But also, that goes for me as a DP, where when I am DPing, I understand that there's limitations.
Right.
And you know, if I say I want a light coming from over here, and my gaffer goes, "There's no, we can't possibly do that." All right, well, let's pivot. What do you think we can do otherwise?
Mm.
You know,
Do you think you end
so.
up having to pivot more and improvise on the spot when depending on how much pre-production that you've come in or you've
Hmm.
accomplished?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think if you've got pre-production where you can go to locations multiple times, you can walk around it, you can bring your gaffer, your key grip in, and be like, hey, this is this is what I'm trying to achieve. What can we do to achieve this? They've
Okay.
got time to plan it out. I mean, because once you start getting into like doing like crane rigs, or like cantilevered, lighting rigs off of roofs, to come into
Right. Yeah.
a window that's 1 story down off a roof, that stuff requires planning. So, but if you don't have that kind of planning, I'm not going to start bringing in crane rigs.
That's true. Yeah.
If you don't have, you're not going to
You
bring in
can't
crane rigs if
just
you don't have planning.
teleport a crane on will for the director or the DP.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So then it comes back down to well, what am I wanting to achieve lighting wise, and how can we achieve that with what we have?
Okay. What's the most time intensive setup when it comes to lighting?
Night exteriors.
Night exteriors?
Yeah.
Because like I know sometimes like you have to figure out like there's different ways. There's like halo lights. There's just blasting light into the background, and then going to try to tweak it in color grading. I've seen more so larger lights being used obviously at night because you got to cover a larger area.
Yeah.
Are there like common mistakes that you think are made when it comes to lighting a large area at night?
What do you mean by like mistakes? Because it's kind of hard to say that there's mistakes when when it's an aesthetic choice,
Well, it's like suboptimal solutions when better things were present or more easier thing. Because obviously when you're watching a movie and you weren't involved with production, you don't know what they had available. And so,
Sure.
But some things I would imagine are more common than others. Is like you can't just always blast the light into the background and hope it works out in the editing. There's
Right.
color grading and color correction can only fix so much.
Yeah.
Are there any just like commonality, like things that you have witnessed on set that have repeated themselves in terms of a method being suboptimal in terms of how it's used?
I'm not a huge fan of front lighting, especially for night exteriors or night scenes in general. So I mean, maybe I don't know if it's a mistake. I would just say for me, it's not an aesthetic choice where you've got a bunch of trees in the background. I personally like to backlight them, but sometimes you have to front light them. But
Right.
For me, it's like I can usually tell when they're front lit. And sometimes it's just what you can do, because of logistics. And, I mean, it's not always realistic to put, lighting units and generators and stuff, 2 miles from the set just to backlight a tree,
Right. Between the indie world and the larger production world, for more corporate organizations and, studios in that regard, which world do you think has more egos in it?
Oh,
50-50.
I don't know. I would say
you don't have to throw
50-50,
anybody under the
guess.
bus specifically.
No. Like I said, I've been pretty lucky in my career. I usually get to work with, pretty cool people. So,
although there are horror stories, just from my experience about talking to people, maybe there's just not as many egos in creativity that you would think. And, what egos kind of get glamorized or, get the most press. Just maybe it gives a false perception of what the actual world of filmmaking looks like when it comes to vanity and ego. Do you think that's the case?
I think it does happen. I mean, we're working long hours, 6 days a week sometimes. Everybody has a bad day, I've had bad days on set that I would rather not remember, and I'm sure people do remember. I also try to apologize to people afterwards if I've misspoken or maybe spoke louder than I should have. I don't yell at people, but sometimes sometimes you're under the gun and things happen. So.
Have you ever gotten yelled at where it wasn't justified at all?
Probably. I'm sure I have.
Okay. I remember. Well, because I
tend to not.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I tend to try and forget that stuff, you know.
Yeah, you got
But
to let it roll off your shoulder because, like you said,
yeah,
people are working long hours, and whatever happens generally happens because someone was too tired and pissed off the wrong person who was also
it
tired.
happens. Yeah, it happens. You know, and I don't like to hold things against people. You know, in those situations. You know, have I seen? You know, probably what I thought was unjustified bad behavior, probably. But like I said, mostly in my career, I've been pretty lucky personally.
Is there a project that you're most proud of
Um,
that you DP'd?
that I DP'd. You know, Bystanders won. Has been winning quite a few awards at film festivals. You know, won Best Cinematography at Horror Hound. So
Oh, sweet!
I'm pretty
Congratulations.
proud.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm pretty proud of that. Um, Mutilator 2, I'm pretty proud of that one because I feel like we made a fun little movie that lived up to the original, or at least I hope it lived up to the original.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Does Mutilator One have a cult following?
mhm.
Because I'm not
Yeah,
familiar with it too much. I
it's
remember the
you
title,
can
but
get
I'm
it.
just.
You can get it on Prime, and you can get it on Blu-ray through I think Arrow Video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, it's got a cult following. So
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll check it
yeah,
out. I mean,
yeah,
when did that come out? The first one? As you said, it was 40 years ago, so like 1980
Ye-
ish.
yeah. It was 82 or 84, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it might have been 84.
Okay. Do you have specifically in mind for people that are getting into cinematography a good like either TV series or movie that is a prime example of great work?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of them, so
Um.
I'm just curious about your favorite.
Yeah, that's a weird question, or not a weird question. That's a hard question because you know I don't. It all. Uh. I don't know. I think so much media out there now has value,
That's true.
whether it's storytelling or whether it's visual storytelling. I might not necessarily like, a particular movie, but I'm like, I really do like the way it was shot though.
Mm-hmm.
Story wise, I didn't care for it, but the way it was shot was gorgeous, or it might be the opposite. I might be like, didn't care for the way it was shot, but I love the story, you know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true.
you know yeah, and I think it's nice when cinematography and the story are one, when the cinematography very much is related to the story. I think that's when it's best. you know as far as what's best for that, oh man, I don't know.
Well, I was thinking of like a learning experience. Obviously, like you could you could pick a big dog like Christopher Nolan. Anything beautiful,
Mm,
It's just,
sure. Yeah.
uh, but like yeah, there is a lot of media, so that probably wasn't a fair question to be perfectly honest. I should have just asked you what your second favorite color was.
Gray.
I was gonna assume black
uh,
based on your shirt, but that's just me.
no, yeah. No, but uh, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, there's so much out there right now. Being, having Gap so long and being a DP, like anytime I watch something, I'm looking at it visually to, I'm looking at lighting wise, trying to see, what they were doing and everything, and sometimes you're like, oh, that's definitely a reflector because they were just trying to move real fast, and we're hitting them
Mm-hmm.
with a hard backlight, just to give it some shape, and I personally think even stuff like that can be valuable. Like what can you do in a situation where you don't have any control? It's like, oh, maybe we just do a balance or a little negative here.
Right, right.
So
What's the hardest
yeah.
aspect of cinematography to nail down as a craft?
Hmm. Hmm. So as I started DPing more, one of the things that I found surprising was how much I have to think like an editor,
Mm,
right? Because I could make the most gorgeous images in the world, but if they don't cut together, I feel like the film lacks, or it's going to be missing something. you know.
There's also a conversation though that because you also have to think like an editor. Directors also have to think like an editor because they're going to be in the editing
Mhm.
room and working with that. So, do you
Yeah.
find it often that you end up with conversations with the director, not even about like the direction or the cinematography, but rather about the editing? That you're both
Oh,
affecting.
sure. Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. I don't know how many times, we'll come up with a shot list. Me and the director will come up with a shot list. We'll be going through the scene, and then we'll be like, okay, we got this last shot to do. Like, do we even need that? Like, you're never going to go to that in the edit,
Mm,
And sometimes we'll make that decision right there, Um, So
okay.
yeah, all it happens all the time, you know.
Right.
So
Well, I mean,
you know,
because the thing I've been working on most of the past few years is the craft of writing. And so when you're talking about
mhm,
editing, like I also, when I'm writing, have to think about like how these scenes are going to look in the edit, how that's going to flow,
mhm,
and you should be able to, when you read a script, see the edit in your head. It should flow, very naturally and everything.
yeah.
So when you're envisioning editing, um, are there any commonalities that you find yourself avoiding that you think would work when you're on location, but you have a second thought and think, okay, maybe this wouldn't work on end? Is it like wide shots, medium shots, or just too many? Like indie film, the indie world is also known for its close-ups. They love their close-ups. I
Oh
think
yeah.
their close-ups, their inserts, they got to squeeze every little micro shot in there somehow. So,
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
my question is more
I,
shot related specifically.
sure, sure. This is going to sound probably pretty basic, but just your wide establishing shot, right? Because a lot of times on indie features, you just don't have the ability to control a large space,
I can attest
right?
to that. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
true.
So if you want to get back and just watch the scene happen, right?
Hmm.
Like a stage, sometimes sometimes you can't do that, and so I think as an indie filmmaker, that's one of the things I really want to do more is just let the entire scene just play out in a wide
Got
shot
to let it
for a
breathe.
master. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, those also are the
yeah.
most expensive shots, in many regards, because if you're like shooting in the city and you need a wide shot, either you got to gorilla gun it or you have to work with there's a whole logistical process of like working with the
Yeah.
city and being able to actually block that off and get permission to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 exactly. And I think that I talk about scale a lot. And I think that's sometimes where scale comes in. It's just like main character, walking down city streets, bumping into a crowd, hundreds of people going through 2 blocks. It's like, well, you know, do we have that ability? You
Hmm.
know, if you can block off the streets, great, let's do it. I think that's awesome. But sometimes you just don't have that ability. So yeah, I think shot wise, sitting back just watching a nice wide shot play out, a nice interesting watch, or being able to add movement to a wide establishing shot, where maybe you start wide and start moving in and kind of moving between characters and adding in that movement.
Well, then you got to
You
deal with an
know,
expensive jib though, because if you're going to do that, you're going to have to
exactly. Yeah,
transition
yeah.
into it. Then you're going to do all those
hmm
things.
Yeah, right. And so, but I think that's some of the things where, yeah, you know, where, on the indie side, I would like to do more of. We don't all have the
Hmm.
money for a techno crane.
Do you have any comments about when it comes to the indie scene about what could change for the better?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because there could be a lot of them.
Like
There's a lot of, well, it's a very wide question, so you can answer it however you like.
yeah, yeah. I was wondering if there was a certain direction you were thinking.
Thinking more like
Because I'd
as
love
a
to.
community, any like negative
Hmm.
tendencies that you see kind of persist from set to set.
Um. No, I mean, I don't know. I hate to say this. Sometimes pay can be one
Well,
of those
yeah.
things.
Well,
For
I asked
everybody.
that question
But
because there's one comment that I did get. It's like sometimes, you know, obviously when you work with certain people and you like them, you want to work with them again, especially, when
yeah.
resources are small and you're comfortable with that person. It's like, when you find your people,
hmm
you find your people. But
Sure.
one person that I talked to, it said sometimes it can become a little too cliquey. Do you think clickiness is kind of persistent in a negative way throughout the film community and the indie level?
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm sure it can be. I think we're pretty lucky here in Ohio, where we're a large state and we all know each other. You
That's
know,
true. It's the largest small town ever.
yeah, it's an entire state. That's a small town. Um, I don't know. I don't feel like we get too clicky. Like I feel like I can work with anybody.
Hmm.
Here. And so I'm still thinking about your original question. What I think in the indie world should change or could change.
Maybe there's something that like I mean, obviously more funding, more money. Maybe that would just fix all the problems. Maybe money would just fix everything.
It doesn't
Um,
always fix all the problems.
no, it
I
doesn't. You
think
can't just throw
distribution's
money
a
at a
thing.
situation to be better, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think distribution's a thing. Trying to figure out, like, and this is just more something I thought about. It's like, how do we get funding to do more indies here, and then how do we get the distribution to do that?
Hmm.
You know, that is not something I am adept at. That is not my side of the world. So, I don't know, because I've taken up writing a little bit lately. Like, you said you have been trying to
Hmm.
write a little bit myself, and I'm kind of like, oh, well, how could we get this out? If I did get this written,
Okay.
or when I get this written. So,
All right. I'm not going to call you Chase. I remembered it. I'm going to call you Chance. I said it.
oh, that's all
Yeah,
good.
say. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man. I appreciate it,
Yeah,
especially since you had a
yeah.
crazy schedule and everything. So,
Oh, it's all
um,
good. It was a good
yeah.
time. I appreciate it.
Do
So,
you have any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
mm, mm.
Drop some wisdom here, man. Just
Oh
go
man, I
full
don't
on
know.
Socrates for me.
Usually one of my things on the set is that we're not, we're making pretty pictures and telling stories. That's what I like doing.
Okay. Well,
I
sure.
I don't know if that's very Socrates like, but usually
It
when I
wasn't, but
when I
that's
tell people
okay.
on
I
set,
mean, whatever your honest thoughts are, it's fine.
yeah. I mean that's what the job comes down to. We're trying to tell a story, and as a DP, I'm trying to make pretty pictures. So.
Well, let me give you another one then. Um, what can you say to a creative that wants to get into filmmaking, but they're kind of paralyzed by the idea of making something bad? What would you say to them to encourage them?
Oh, I would say just do it.
Nike.
I yeah. Nike, just do it. No, seriously. I mean, there is a market for almost anything. You know, um, you know, and you're gonna have bad ideas. Sometimes it happens. Everybody does. I have bad ideas.
Hmm.
But don't let that stop you. I think trying to get what you want out there is what you should do. If you're wanting to make a movie, and
Can't be
constructive
afraid to mess
criticism is
up.
good, but yeah, you can't be afraid to mess up. I mess up all the time.
Hmm.
you know.
All right. Well, thanks again, Chance. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.